This summer, and the summer is cranking along, we have been focusing on healing, sort of healing as wholeness, and the many ways we can experience healing from the brokenness that we have in this life. And sometimes I think healing comes when we let go of harmful beliefs that leave us broken. Now, you might notice, as I have, that our daily lives seem to be filled with messages of scarcity. These are messages that we keep hearing that are telling us that there's not enough. There's not enough food for everyone in the world. There are not enough jobs. There's not enough money to be able to pay a living wage. These are dangerous and damaging beliefs. And this is a belief that leaves us fearful and leaves us isolated, and it's just not true. Our scriptures send us a different message, a message of abundance, of love and connection, and I think this is what the story that we're reading today is really about. Now, last week we skimmed over this story of Jesus feeding 5,000 in order to really look at the struggle he and his friends were having trying to balance their work and their rest and trying not to give in to compassion fatigue. So today we're actually reading the same story from a different perspective because we have 4 Gospels in our scriptures, 4 descriptions of the life and times of Jesus written by 4 authors living in 4 different communities who are looking back at their experience. Each one remembering things a little bit differently, sharing different experiences, and in particular the stories that stuck in their minds, that stayed with them. And so it's really interesting that all 4 of the Gospels include this story of feeding 5,000 people. And Matthew and Mark add another similar story. Jesus feeds another 4,000 people. But the funny thing is, in all of these 6 stories, there are lots of leftovers. Now this time we're reading it from John's Gospel, and Jesus is sitting a ways up on a mountainside, and his disciples realize it's getting late. People are starting to get hungry. Now, we're given a clue here that the first people reading this would have caught right away. The narrator says, by the way, the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. Well, the Passover is a reminder of that Exodus story, where God provides bread along with freedom for the Israelites, manna in the wilderness. Our Old Testament passage today was another example of Elisha being able to feed with an abundance of food. So what is happening in this story is much like what God has been doing all along, because God has abundant resources and always has. Now this time, Jesus takes a moment, he asks Philip, where are we going to buy bread for all these people to eat? And Philip thinks for a minute, well, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each person here to even get a little. Philip is aware of their limited financial resources. Now, others must have been passing the word around that Jesus is thinking about keeping everybody there to provide a meal. Andrew steps up with a boy he found who has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, but he can't imagine how this is going to solve their dilemma. Then Jesus has everyone sit in the grass, and he takes the loaves, and when he has given thanks, he distributed them, so all the fish as much as they wanted. And we realize these words sound kind of familiar. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples. This food that is given abundantly on this day is foreshadowing the gift of the life that will be given on another Passover gathering. This gift of love we remember each month with the Lord's Supper. So they start passing it around, and they keep passing food around, and everyone seems to be getting enough to eat. So why is there suddenly enough bread? This is a story about abundance, about God's abundant resources and the abundant life that we are promised. And this message of abundance is not going to be missed. Our story continues after they were satisfied. They had enough to eat. Jesus told the disciples, gather up the fragments and the leftovers so we don't waste anything. And they gathered them up, and the 5 barley loaves and all who had eaten, and after all of that, they had 12 baskets. So what is going on here? Is this a sleight of hand trick? Is there something really more important happening? Let's think about the situation. Would 5,000 people really have left home that day with absolutely no provisions as they traveled that far? I don't know about you, but when I'm traveling, I know I've been reminded, whether I'm in a car or I'm taking Marta, don't leave without your water bottle. Make sure you stay hydrated. Don't forget to throw a snack in your bag if it's going to be a long day. Can you really imagine all these people traveling by foot in a harsh environment and not taking any food with them? So maybe the problem wasn't a scarcity of food that day. The problem was the age-old problem of people being controlled by their belief in scarcity. Because how does one behave when we believe that the resources are scarce? We're afraid of giving up too much. We start to hoard a little bit, afraid that, we don't want to let anyone know what we have because there isn't really enough for everyone to go around. Jesus understands our human economics, understands the way that we tend to think in terms of scarcity. Philip was flawless in his mathematical calculations. He says 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for even everyone to get a little. But there was a child in the crowd not thinking about economics, but feeling empathy and generosity, and he's bold enough to offer up the food that he brought with him. And now Jesus has the opportunity to show the entire crowd that it takes a child's faith to enter into the kingdom of God. It takes the economically naive to be open to God's economics of abundance. So Jesus takes this meager offering from a child and he gives thanks for it and he begins to hand it out. And lo and behold, all those economic calculations are overturned. 5 barley loaves and 2 fish are enough to feed all 5,000 people. Now, is this because Jesus, the Son of God, can defy the laws of nature and multiply loaves of bread and fish? Or is it because Jesus, the Son of God, and he actually believes in a God of abundance? Now, I personally have no trouble believing that the God of creation could take a loaf of bread and turn that one into 10 or 100 or 5,000. But I need some help believing that the God of creation can also open tight-fisted hearts and fearful hearts to believe in the abundance of God and the importance of love and sharing. So this story means a little bit more to me. It meets my needs when I think about it in terms of abundance and scarcity. And of course, reading this always reminds me of one of my favorite childhood stories of stone soup. Anyone else remember that from your childhood? I know kids these days, there's so many opportunities out there, I don't know that they've all heard the same ones. But the story goes, once upon a time, there were people living in a small village, and they didn't have enough to eat, and they were afraid that their families were going to go hungry, so they hid the small amount of food that they had. And then one day, a stranger came wandering into their village, and he asked the people he met if he could get something to eat. There's not a bite to eat in this whole county, they told him. You probably should just keep moving on. Oh, I have everything I need, he told them. In fact, I would like to make some stone soup to share with all of you. So he pulled a big black cooking pot from his wagon, and he filled it with water, and he built a fire under it, and he reached into his knapsack, and he pulled a plain gray stone from the bag, and he dropped it into the water. And as the stranger sniffed the stone soup and he licked his lip, the villagers began to come closer, and they overcame their fear. And the stranger said to himself, I do like tasty stone soup. Of course, stone soup with cabbage is even better. And soon a child ran from his house and holding a cabbage and offered it. And then the stranger said, I once had stone soup with cabbage and a bit of beef, and it was delicious. And the butcher came. He said, I think I can find maybe a few beef scraps. And he ran back to his shop, and gradually the other villagers came and offered, a little bit of vegetables from their gardens, potatoes and onions and carrots and celery. And soon that big black pot was bubbling and steaming, and when the soup was ready, everyone in the village ate a bowl of soup, and it was delicious. Turns out there was enough for everyone when they overcame their fear and they chose to share what they had. Paul Nurturlin suggests maybe the real miracle in this story of Jesus feeding 5,000 people was the one incredible moment when all those hardened grown-ups became like the child and opened their hearts to the God of abundance. Because God's economics are fundamentally different than human economic systems. And in Jesus Christ, we believe that God's kingdom, God's household, God's economics have come to be with us on earth. Now, I think it's important to recognize that abundance is different from affluence. We talk about someone being affluent when they have more than they need, more money, more food or clothes or cars or houses. An affluent person has more than enough for themselves and their family, and well, that's pretty much where it stops. They have a large amount of a limited supply. An affluent country has more than enough resources for its people, as opposed to a non-affluent country that don't have enough for their own. But there always seems to be the assumption of a limited supply. When something is abundant, there is more than enough for everyone. If there's an abundant harvest, there is plenty to share. God is not just affluent. God is a God of abundance, providing love, grace, overflowing, enough for everyone and offered to everyone with no reservations and lots of leftovers. God promises unending love, the Spirit's continuing guidance in our lives, and this creation filled with all that we really need. If we could just let go of our fear and trust in this creator of the universe. So our question is the bottom line of economics always and only about profit? Or might we begin to see a balance of that bottom line with other values such as generosity? Or believing in abundance also means believing in generosity. It means joining God in the care of an abundant creation. Unfortunately, our current global economic system is based on maximizing profits for those who hold the power, and that sacrifices the most vulnerable people, and it sacrifices the natural world. We know today that our communities face the worst climate catastrophe and dislocation around the world. Our current system is unsustainable. And it might feel like scarcity defines your life right now, when the bills that need to be paid are bigger than the income, when good jobs are hard to find, everything costs too much. It's easy to believe that there just isn't enough for everyone. But if we want to begin living according to God's economics of abundance, first we have to question the assumptions about scarcity. There is enough in God's good creation for all, but not the way we are doing things now. And maybe we personally cannot fix the entire global economic system by ourselves, but we can advocate for change. We can live into our faith in God's abundance, the God who cares for all people and all of creation. We can begin with ourselves, in our lives, in our community, in our city. Not allowing the people with power to convince us that immigrants are taking our jobs or there aren't enough resources, so we should only care about our own families or our own nation. Instead, we can engage in a practice of radical kindness, opening our hearts to understanding in a non-defensive approach, holding ourselves, one another, with compassion and respect across the world, across race and class or sex and gender or age or ability. At the heart of the Jewish idea of kismet, of tikkun ulam, of healing the world, is how can we believe in a better way? How can we begin to create a better world? How can we hold space to listen for the answers to those questions? Somehow, together, we can live into our faith in a God of abundance, a God of creation who cares for all people and all of this created order. This is what I believe is at the heart of our community. This is at the heart of who we are. And we will continue to seek to be people who believe in a God of abundance. But for today, let's continue to sing of this God and our faith together.